There are so many interesting things in the world, so many things that I could do my project on, but I decided to do my project on something that I really love to do, a subject that is so weird, so hard to follow, yet so interesting. Art. More specifically, art history. And I was wondering about art. I wondered about how it came to be, why there are so many kinds, why art isn't just one specific thing, why art is art, basically, why it changed and what made it change. Then, from all the questions I had in my mind, I settled on one. How do specific events in history affect the style of art that is popular? I started by researching the actual art movements. There are many art styles, but an art movement is, I quote, a tendency or style in art with a specific common philosophy or goal, followed by a group of artists over a period of time. What that really means is a time period when a lot of artists paint the same way. While I was researching, I came across three movements that I really knew: Romanticism, Realism, and Surrealism. Romanticism is a style of art that shows emotional and spiritual scenes. Instead of painting things that are seen and actually happening, Romantic artists painted from instinct and imagination. The Romantic movement, which took place from the late 1700s to the early 1800s, started in Europe and extended all the way to the United States. During the Romantic movement, the French Revolution, which took place from 1789 to 1799, was going on. The Napoleonic Wars, 1799 to 1815, were also going on during the time of Romanticism, a whimsical, emotional style of art. Many people think that this style of Romanticism, which makes things look better than they actually are in many. Realism is unlike most other art styles. It isn't romanticized, so it wasn't painted from feelings or nature or landscapes or dreams. In fact, the realism movement rejected romanticism, which is the style a lot of things were painted in before the realism movement. Instead, it showed ordinary people, everyday things happening. It sometimes showed distasteful subjects, the hardships of everyday life. Realism was an attempt to show everyday people and situations in an accurate way. In other words, it was real-life art, hence the name realism. But what was going on during the time the realist movement was happening? Well, the realism movement took place from about the mid-1800s to the early 1900s. Realism developed in France. Gustave Courbet, a French artist and leader of the realism movement, thought Romanticism, a form of art that displays emotion, was just a way to escape from realities such as poverty and war. A revolt in France in 1848 was actually part of a wave of revolutions that erupted in Europe during that year. Maybe after the war had finished, artists had decided to stop depicting life as better than it actually was. Maybe the war had mentally changed these people, making them realize that life was not as amazing as it was shown in art. That led me to the conclusion that events in history did actually spark the movement realism. Then I decided to look at another movement, one that occurred just a little while after the realism movement. When you think of this movement, you might think of this guy, Salvador Dali. That's because he was one of the most famous painters who painted in this style. He was a surrealist. Surrealism is quite the opposite of realism, as the name suggests. Surrealism emerged in the late 1910s and the early 1920s. The style began in France, just like realism did. The word surreal is the French word that actually means beyond real or more than real, rather than not real, as a person might think. This style almost looks like hallucinations. The images you see are very real objects, but they are shown in a peculiar way. What was going on at the time of surrealism? In America, the economy is strong. People seem to have lots of spare money to spend. More Americans were living in cities rather than on farms. It was a good time for Americans, also a time of massive change in everyday life. It was also a time of rebellion against social laws. Many people partied and drank during this era, known also as the Roaring Twenties, including some of the artists who painted in a surrealist style. Toulouse-Lautrec, a surrealist artist, was known for drinking absinthe, an alcoholic drink that could cause hallucinations. Many other surrealist artists did the same, which could have been a cause for their strange paintings that look similar to hallucinations.